So if you've been following this case about people accused or alleged that were part of a terrorist organization being sent to some inhumane violation of the Eighth Amendment protection from cruel and unusual punishment and just inhumane types of prisons, maybe a lot of people think, yeah, well, they were terrorists, so we don't care. But what the media doesn't discuss, and what maybe you may not know, that in this same case that is now before the United States Supreme Court, and they issued their ruling today, what you also need to know is that the government argued that they should be allowed to do this, not just for people who are listed as terrorists, foreign terrorists coming to our land to do evil criminal acts, but that they should be allowed to do this to United States citizens. So that was mentioned by one of the justices, that is what the government was arguing for. So I want to share this with you so you can see with your own eyes they in fact are trying to destroy not only due process for the United States citizens, that for any particular reason they can just go round people up, not give them any kind of hearing or notice, and send them off to a torture prison, even if you're a United States citizen. Oh, yes, they did. And here's the case. I will put the link in the description so you can read it with your own eyes if you so incline. So this is the application to vacate the injunction that was entered by the United States District Court for the District of Maryland. Okay, so on April 10th, 2025, that is today, April 10th, 2025. On March 15th, this is the guy who was, that our government, the United States of America, even admitted that they wrongfully sent, but they're like, they want to keep him there, even though he doesn't belong there, and they admit their error. Well, anyways, the United States Supreme Court ruled today, you better get him out of there. Okay, so it says on March 15th, United States removed Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia from the U.S. to El Salvador. He's currently detained in the Center for Terrorism Confinement, CCOT. The United States acknowledges he was a subject to a withholding order from 2019 that forbid his removal to El Salvador, and that the removal to El Salvador was therefore illegal. The U.S. represents the removal to El Salvador was the result of an administrative error. The United States alleges, however, that he's been found to be a member of the gang MS-13, even though they have literally zero evidence of that, which is why they didn't give him any notice or due process of a hearing to prove otherwise, which the Supreme Court has also ruled, even if they invoke the Alien Act, Enemies Act, they still must give them due process regardless. It says that Garcia responds that he's not a member of this gang. He's lived safely in the United States with his family for a decade. He has never been charged with any crime. On Friday, April 4th, the United States District Court for the District of Maryland entered an order directing the government to facilitate and effectuate the return of Abrego Garcia. Now, this is the one where the Chief Justice basically put a stay on the deadline. It says on the morning of April 7th that he basically gave him a deadline to effectuate his return, but this order today has lifted Chief Justice's, vacated his order, because basically that deadline has passed. So, anyways, the Chief Justice entered the stay, subsequently referred the application to the court. The application is granted in part and denied in part, subject to direction of this order. Due to the administrative stay issued by Chief Justice, the deadline imposed by District Court has now passed, so that extent that the government's emergency application is effectively granted in part, and the deadline in the challenged order is no longer effective. The rest of the District Court order remains in effect, but requires clarification on remand. Order properly requires the government to facilitate his release from custody in El Salvador and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. The scope of the term effectuate in the District Court's order is unclear and may exceed the District Court's authority, but the District Court should clarify its directive with due regard for the deference owed to the executive branch in the conduct of foreign affairs. Where it's part, the government should be prepared to share what it can, meaning like they were basically refusing to even give information to that. They were just like, well, we don't want to tell you anything. And so the Supreme Court has ruled, yes, you do. You must be prepared to share what it can concerning the steps it taken and the prospect of further steps. The order heretofore entered by the Chief Justice is vacated. And so then, here's where it talks about they wanted to do this to the United States citizens. They're going to North Korea our government. Eighth Amendment says you cannot punish somebody in a cruel and unusual way. All punishment in prisons have to be upon a standard. There's no torture allowed, and you must give them basic needs of life, and you can't abuse them, basically, right? So the United States government arrested him, flew him to a terrorist confinement center. To this day, the government has cited no basis in law for his warrantless arrest, his removal of El Salvador, or his confinement in El Salvador in prison, nor could it. The government remains bound by that 2019 order that prohibits his removal because he faced a clear probability of future persecution there. Okay, instead of hastening to correct its egregious error, the government dismissed it as an oversight. The government now requests an order from this court allowing it to just leave him there. A husband and father without a criminal record, in a Salvadorian prison for no reason recognized by the law. The only argument the government offers in support of its request that the United States courts cannot grant relief once a deportee crosses the border is plainly wrong. And keep in mind, we're paying those prisons to house people. We should never be paying another country to detain people. If they were deported properly, due process, then they would have gone back to their country. And if anybody says, well, they just really didn't want them, yeah, that's not true. That's misinformation. If they're deported legally, their countries should foot the bill on detaining those people if they need detained. We should not be paying our tax dollars to another country to detain people. That's wrong. Okay? So anyways, the government argument, moreover, here it is right here, implies that it could deport and incarcerate any person, including United States citizens, without legal consequence, so long as it does so before a court can intervene. That is what people need to be concerned about. That in all the hoopla and all this stuff going on in the media, they're hiding from you that they're wanting to do this same thing to United States citizens. You literally could be rounded up, falsely accused of being part of some terrorist organization, or for whatever reason they want to, just detain you without legal consequence. They're literally actively trying to destroy our due process and turn us into a dictatorship like North Korea and Russia, where they can just round you up on the street for holding a sign that says they're against war or something like that, which they've been doing in Russia. I mean, this is bad, people. This is bad. So if you're somebody that's just like, well, I don't care what they do to them because I don't like them because I think they're bad people and they do what they get, yeah. So this is not okay. It's never okay to violate the divinely ordained due process to prevent false accusations. It says, every factor governing requests for equitable relief manifestly weighs against the government. I would have declined to intervene in this litigation and denied the application in full. Nevertheless, I do agree with the court's order that the proper remedy is to provide him with all the process to which he could have been entitled had he not been unlawfully removed. That means the government must comply with its obligation to provide him with due process of law, including notice and an opportunity to be heard in any future proceedings. So if they take into trying to just ship people off without due process again, a federal judge anywhere can, of course, may stop them, may issue orders. You may not ship people without due process. And this case right here that I'm sharing with you will be the most recent power to those judges. Meanwhile, these Republicans of trying to pass a law that no district judge can issue anything nationwide. And of course, this case right here says, yes, they can. Because you will not, no matter what law you try to pass, you will not be able to destroy due process. And I also want to make a note of the fact that I found a case today that was basically no group of immigrants can get a class certification to try to stop their deportation. And that is what Boersberg did. He did temporarily grant a class certification, and I'm going to share this case with you. This case right here is a 2022 case, Garland versus Gonzalez, which basically says that the district court certified a class of similarly situated plaintiffs and joined the government from detaining the class members under the Section 1231 for more than 6 months without providing each bond hearing. The Ninth Circuit affirmed. It says the holdings is that the Immigration and Nationality Act deprives district courts of jurisdiction to entertain detained aliens' request for class-wide injunctive relief. Okay, there's very limited situations where they can get a class cert. So anyways, there's that. And then even empowers the district court. It says in the proceedings on remand, the district court should continue to ensure that the government lives up to its obligations to follow the law. So not only did they basically just agree with at least part of Judge Boersberg's actions, although the venue was basically shot down on, they're saying, okay, well, they're going to have to file their case in another court, meaning Texas. However, even if he was, like, he hadn't even got a chance to review anything as far as venue. They haven't even gotten through the whole process on whether venue was even properly before them, because they hadn't even been able to really progress in the lawsuit. They just started deporting people. It was a very, recent case. And so they basically shot down the venue. They agreed with the venue argument. However, even if that part of the order of Boersberg, when he issued an order and they did not comply with, they can still be found in contempt. And any district court who issues an order that they must follow due process, it says right here, in the proceedings on remand. This is the Boersberg case, Judge Boersberg's case, right? The district court should continue saying, you better make the government obey the law. This is what the Supreme Court did that they're not talking about in the media. Saying, hey, district court judge, make them accountable. Make sure they obey the law. That is as loud as you can get for 9 justices to say, we stand with this judge that nobody gets to be above the law and you will obey court orders. In the proceedings on remand, the district court should continue to ensure that the government lives up to its obligations to follow the law. Follow the law, right? Okay, that's pretty strong words. So I'm very thankful how this turned out. So you see a lot of this about basically that they, ruled against Boersberg. No, they didn't. The only thing they shot down was the venue that they agreed that, and they probably should have filed in Texas. But nonetheless, those orders that he issued that they failed to comply, if he decides that they were in contempt, they have to give due process. They had no right whatsoever to deport anybody like that. Even if they invoke the Enemy Aliens Act, due process shall not be destroyed. And no, you don't get to send United States citizens to a prison that tortures people. You will obey the 8th Amendment to not punish people in a cruel and unusual way. No, you will not. And you will not violate their due process, even if we're at war.